Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I want to get the transmission sorted. See you in a minute. Now, having got the chassis complete, engine mounted, gearbox mounted, that only leaves me a couple of things to get it sorted so that it will run and drive. The second of those things is actually hooking up the motor to the throttle pedal and the brakes to the brake pedal, and that's something which I'm working on alongside everything else, but it's not quite there yet. But this time I want to get the transmission sorted. Should be fairly straightforward, but that's usually when things go wrong, and as you will see, it tends to fight me a bit along the way, but I think we'll get there in the end. Now I want to sort the wheels out if I can today. I haven't got the bolts that I need, but I think I can at last bite the bullet and do the work I need to. I've got to drill 4 holes. They're quite near the edge, and you would think logically those holes that I had made in the plates should have been further in, and that's partly true, but I am working with a fixed spacing on the hub, and maybe I should have used the 3 fixing hub that they have from Gemini, which has got a smaller radius I think on it, but I'm stuck with that one, so that's where I've got to go. So I need to drill 10mm holes down through there. Now it will just clip the very edge of the rim, and there are logical places that it should be and shouldn't be, if you see what I mean. I think logically it needs to be as close to one of these webs as possible, because that's probably the strongest point on the wheel, but not there, because if it's there you're going to end up drilling another hole very close to that one and end up with a big gap. So I think I'm going to go somewhere around there with the hole. I'm tempted also, when this is done, to flood these with resin, just as something to make the whole thing a bit more solid. But at the moment I'm just going to put them roughly in the right place, and then get a 9mm or 9.5mm drill. I've got to do it by hand because I can't get it in a vertical drilling machine, and I'm just going to drill through, and once one is fixed I can then put a bolt through and work my way around the others. So we'll make a start with this. There's a bit of a taper on the inside of the brake drum as well that needs to be filed, but I think that should get us the first one in. Just give it a try. The first stage done. Got to wait now for the bolts to do the rest. Now the bolts have arrived to put the rear wheels together, so I can make a start on getting those clearanced out. They need a bit of work doing to get the bolts to go through straight. Let's just get this off a minute and you'll see. I think I alluded to it earlier, we've got to just clearance the old brake, well, it's new wheel, but it's where the brake runs. There's a steel rim in there, and it's just enough to stop the stud coming through square. So I'm having to just relieve those. It will put a bit of weakness in it, I suppose, but bearing in mind these plates clamp the wheel together and carry the drive through. I'm hoping it will be okay when we're finished. We'll see with time. So I'm just going to have a go. I've been filing them so far, but I'm going to have a go with little Dremel to see if I can get that to go through, take some of the work out of it, and we'll see if we can get them both get both wheels sorted that way. Right, that's got the back axle pretty much sorted now. The wheels are now mounted properly on their hubs. I've got to put the colours on the outside edge before I put the circlips on there, but I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. And there are no keys in the keyway as yet, which will need another collar to hold the collar in, I think. But those collars there stop it going sideways on either side. We've got the disc brake on, so that pretty much wraps up the back axle up until we're actually ready to start and prepare it to run, if you like. So I'm quite happy that that's gone pretty well. Right, so having got the cart running last week, I think the next thing I want to do is to get it driving, and by that I mean driving the rear wheels. And then the stage after that is to connect everything up to the pedals, and in theory then we have a working cycle cart. But there's a load of stuff to do in the meantime. I've still got all these worries about clearances and whether everything will be alright in here. So I really need to get this running up on blocks, I think, first of all, and see how we go. So working from the engine, I know that's okay. I think that needs tightening up. There's a bolt on the end of that end of the TAV. This end of the TAV isn't connected at all, so I've got to put the key into the keyway and rebolt that up. So that will get me from the motor to the gearbox. So that's, if you like, stage one. We'll start with that one. Get that bolt done up first. Maybe it's meant to be a bit loose, I don't know. Now, this has turned out to be a bit more of a problem, or a bit more of a job than I thought it would be. The bolt that I'd got that bolted the TAV onto the end of the motor didn't seem to be screwing in very far. And I started thinking, well, I could shim it out with some washers to work it, but when I looked, there is only about that much of it holding in. So I've come back to the motor, which I don't know, but judging by what I can see and tell from putting things in, it should be an M8 thread. That's what this bolt is, which I've had with the TAV. I put an M7 in and it screwed in perfectly well, but was very sloppy. So I get the impression it should be an M8 because that's the same thread pitch, 1mm. But it just wasn't quite there. And so I'm just popping a tap into it now, just to run it a bit deeper, which seems to be doing the job. So I don't know, I think that's fair enough. I think it's a reasonable thing to have done. I don't really see any alternative. I just didn't feel very comfortable with what was effectively about 2 threads of holding the end of the TAV on. So we will just try that now. I've taken it a bit deeper with the thread, with the tool. That's probably the first bit of poor quality control and downside of buying Chinese. rather than a Honda engine, but that's better. That's now going in and that's snugging up tight. I've got a much more, yeah, happy with that. So we move on up to the next part in the equation, which is getting the key into that keyway up there, and then we can screw that one on. And of course, as ever with anything like this, I put the keyway down earlier and I've probably lost it already. Just tidy up and put these taps away and we'll have a look. Where's the key? It's typical, I've been carefully oh, here it is, right under my nose. I'm going to say I've been carefully keeping this thing where I could see it for the best part of 6 months, so I knew I'd lose it. First time I start to use it today, I've lost it. Right, get that and get the keyway into the right place on that. See, and that slips the top end of the TAV on. There's a washer and a bolt, that's a nylock nut on there, and we need to get a socket on that. Right. Now in theory we can now drive the gearbox if we start the engine. Not sure I'm particularly worried about that. It does look as if the motor could do with going that way a bit now. I was sort of too far the other way, but going that way will actually help me with the chain as well. Now it's all done up. I was worried about it not having enough width or the alignment being out on that, but in fact I think I've overdone it. With a straight edge on that, on those inner ones. Yeah, probably about 1/4 of an inch too far over that way with the motor now, and that has implications for the chain catching on bolts and that on there. Might just slacken the motor off and push it over a bit, we'll see. Right, after about half an hour's struggle, definitely the wrong way to have done this. I should have got all this lined up first and then tried to start the motor, because it's full of oil at the moment and therefore, and all the electrics and everything are plumbed into it. But I've now got the motor plate out, which needs moving across that way, 5 or 6 mil. Now, okay, so after a massive amount of disruption and about 2 hours work and a lot of scratches and bleeding, we've got the motor back in. Really pleased with the way it's gone, although I should have done it before, but you never know these things. That now is absolutely bang on in line for the TAV and the gearbox mount. I've had a bit of a leak with the petrol, which has stunk the house out, but I think we can sort that out. I think it's a connector more than anything else. Wants redoing. All my electrical connections are off at the moment, again because I've had to get the motor out effectively. But it's worth the effort. It doesn't give me a huge amount of room on this side now because I've pushed the motor over 5 mil, but there is room and that's all that matters. And as I say, the chain wheel is now dead in line, as well as the TAV belt, so I'm pleased that it's all gone together right in the end. So we'll just shorten this chain and we can maybe jack it up and have a go. Okay, so we're now a week or more beyond the stage when I got the TAV mounted and lined up, because I hit a bit of a problem, which it's taken me a while to get my head round, and I've suddenly found out why. I was putting the chain on and it was all going so well until, if I got round about 3/4 of the way round the chain wheel, things started to go awry. Just get it undone and you can see. It's all fitting beautifully until you get round like here and it starts to not fit, and I couldn't quite understand it. See, by over there you can see the tooth is on the same level as the roller, and I was pretty certain I'd got a 420 chain and a 420 chain wheel, and I sort of hummed and hawed and thought something was wrong with the wheel or whatever. And then I checked back through all my purchases and realised that I'd bought a 428 chain, which is the same pitch. The spacings are the same as the 420 chain, but the size of the roller on it is very slightly different. And so it might only be a few thou on each one, but when you add these things up, it'll be all right for the first few because everything works. You know, there's a bit of tolerance in there, but by the time you got round halfway around the chain wheel, it won't work. So that was the problem. So I've got myself a new 420 chain, which I'm now going to pop in. The other thing that I realised with this when I started to look at it was that I was always confident that I wouldn't have too much of a problem with getting the chain length to within one link, so that if I'd got a little bit of slack it wouldn't be a problem. But when I started looking at these things, I realised also that to get the joining link in, which is what I'd need to do, you have to have two like inner parts of the chain, not the outer parts. One at each end, like that, and then you can drop that in like so. But what you can't do is move on to the next half a link there and join it there. It won't do it, because you'd then have that one being on top and it being on top of that one, so it just wouldn't work. So I'd then have to go to that one. So to adjust this chain you actually need an adjustment of two links in the distance between the two. Now I don't know whether that's going to be a problem or not, but I'm hoping I can get somewhere close, because if I have to change the distance between that cog there on the gearbox and the main cog, which isn't that far, I've got two alternatives. I can either lift the gearbox, which then causes a problem with the distance between the gearbox and the TAV and the outlet on the motor, or I can change the height of the rear axle, and that's okay, yeah, fine. I'd already thought that I can do that to change my ground clearances without any great fuss. But of course that then brings into question how that disc brake, which is already a little bit off the caliper, starts to fall out of the caliper if you lengthen it. If you lift the cart up and get a bit more ground clearance, if I drop it down to get it further into there, it'll mean that the ground clearance, which is already pretty low, is even lower. So I don't know how I'm going to get on with that. We'll see how it transpires when we get this new chain on. But it is a possibility that I've got a problem. So I'll just set the camera up and we will make a start on at least getting an idea of where this chain is going to fit and what sort of adjustment we need on it. Well, the task for the day really is to get this thing fired back up, which means I've got to reconnect the wires to the engine. But let's get this this chain hooked up and see if we've got a problem, and if we have got a problem, how big it is, and then we can get the chain shortened, hopefully fitted today. Would be nice too, and we can get the thing off the ground and see if we can get the wheels running. That's the aim of the exercise today, and if I can do that, and there's one other thing I want to check, which is while I'm around the back end and got power leads out and things, and that's the little tachometer I've bought for the cart. I just want to see if I can get that to work and to read while the motor's running. We'll just drop this chain on. Bit of a fiddle, and again, perhaps in hindsight, the wrong way around. I should have got the chain on first before the belt. Thankfully it's in neutral, so I can just run the chain over the cog. And first thing I'm going to do is check that I wasn't dreaming and the chain will go around the wheel properly. So will that go around there nicely? Yes, it will. All the way around, it just drops in like a dream, which just goes to show what an idiot I am. Now how that will work out there is, let's tighten that up a bit. Now if I tighten the chain up, that gives me the problem, my worst nightmare if you like, in that I've got a link out. I'm on half a link if you like. There, it's an odd match, because if I took that one off, I'd then have a gap. So I think I might have a problem, which will involve quite a bit of work in lifting and, oh, hang on. Ah, yeah, Mr. Thicky has got it wrong yet again. Let's pop up and have a look and see what I've done. Just wondering how long the brake pipe would last if we carried on with the chain going over it like that. Yeah, that is where the chain will run. So, see what that bit of extra difference in length has done. So if we stretch the chain as tight as we can, beauty, we now run to a point where if I take that link out, I'll just put a straight new link in and we're there. So that is very pleasing to see and hugely time saving. So I've got to just mark up where it's got to be cut, and we'll get the chain shortened. Okay, so that's where I want to break the chain. The beauty of that is that I've now got enough left on the right hand side there to get me a spare as well, so I'll just need to get another joining piece. But I think yeah, we've got a couple of chains there. What I think the process is to grind that pin out. Now I'm not sure whether this will work or not, but it just seems a bit more delicate than taking an angle grinder to things, I've covered up the chain just to try and keep as much swarf out of things as I can, because it's covered in grease and it'll just pick bits up, but I'll have a go. I've now got the other side done and it's come off pretty easily. A little bit of violence, but we've got the chain broken in the right place, I hope. Right, that's got the link in after an awful lot of swearing. The annoying thing is you could push it in from this side easily, but then I think you'd have the same problem getting a little catch on it, and it wouldn't be as easy to access to undo it. So we've got that on, put a plate over the top, and it's relatively tight, but I believe these things will stretch slightly anyway, so I've got a little bit of leeway there. Now then, this should really, I think there's a right and a wrong way to put that clip on so that it's facing the way of the engine, of the wheel running, but again, I'm not too sure, and I'm not going to worry too much about it. It's got the clip on. At the moment there aren't any drive keys in the wheels or anything, but I'm not too bothered about that. It's not taking any load. I'm going to jack this thing up in the air a bit so the wheels are off the ground, and we'll see what happens when we start it up and put it into gear. Right, I've connected everything back up. I've put the battery on. I've put the ignition isolator on. I've put the choke open. I've turned the fuel on. I'm going to see if it will start again, because it's only been started the once. And if that starts and runs without the wheels running, I'm then going to move on to trying to put it into gear and see if it goes forward when I push the lever forward, backwards when I pull the lever back, and we'll see what happens. So I'll just So apart from the problem that the wheels were going forward when I pushed the thing into reverse and backwards when I pushed it into forwards, that's, I think, a success, and that's just simply a matter of changing over those control cables so that the push forward works on the other way around. But at least the principle is there. It's working well, I think. It's just starting to rub on that oil can, so I had to stop it. So another good big step forward, I think. It leaves me one main thing to knock off the list. I will just spend a couple of minutes now checking on the wiring to see if I can get this little rev counter working. I bought a cheap Chinese rev counter. They were about 12 or 13 pounds. But as is usual with these things, when it arrived the rim was all dented and bashed. So I raised a query stroke complaint stroke return with eBay and the supplier, and essentially they did what they usually do. They've just credited me with the sale and sort of left it at that. So effectively I've got that. It's cost me nothing. I will obviously want to put a new face on it, but if I can get that working to run with the motor, clearly it won't run up to 12,000 like the proper 7 did, but once I'm in it and running, there's only me going to see what it goes up to, but at least at tick over it should be running at 1 or 2,000. So we'll have a quiet look at the wiring on that one. There are 5 wires in the back. It's all fairly straightforward. The 2 loose ones there are black and red for the LED lighting, which I'm not going to be using, so I won't bother with those. Green is earth, black is positive, believe it or not, for the main thing, and that is a signal wire, and that's the unknown. I don't know whether that's got to connect to the plug lead or the coil. They say the positive side of the coil, and I'm not sure which one that one is, so I've got to go and have a quick look at that. But we'll get a pair of croc clips and wires out and see if we can't have a go with that as well while we've got the engine running. Right, I've no doubt whatsoever that is totally inaccurate, because there's no way in the world it's revving at 6,000. The governor's set to about 3 or 4, I think, but at least it goes and it shows me something. There is an adjustment somewhere in it that I can perhaps get some further adjustment, but at least I know it works, and I can have something in the dashboard that gives some indication that the engine's running at certain speeds, and I can keep a monitoring eye on it. So all in all, not a bad morning's work. Right, well, once I got the chain sorted, that was the biggest hiccup of the lot, that it was causing me a bit of head scratching. It just shows that whenever you think you've done something, if it was 8-9 months ago or a year ago when you did it, it's worth checking back to make sure, because in this instance the 420 chain I ordered a year ago wasn't. But we got there, it's running. It's now just a matter of hooking up, as I said, the throttle and brakes. We'll do that in a future episode, and then we can actually see if the thing will move under its own steam. So I hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. I'll see you then. Bye!